I'm excited to talk to everyone about the 5 stages. And I was a grassroots construction worker who started with a shovel and a hammer in my hand working in the whole of a high-rise construction site. When you're talking about safety, there isn't much more high-risk activity than working in high-rise windows. This is a journey that we're going to go through. It's a journey about first identifying if you need a safety platform or upgrading your safety platform, and going through that whole process of how do you find the right solution, to how do you implement it, to what do you do after implementation, and then the part I love the most, talking about where do you go from there and where digital safety can take you. As you can see in this first slide, it really is kind of a windy road going through this path, and it can be intimidating. I know from when I was running my company, technology was really non-existent. I always thought our company was cutting edge, and we were fairly cutting edge for the ecosystem we lived in, but that meant our tech stack was emails and Dropbox. And so when I went through the challenges that I had when we started to implement safety, it was really about 7 years ago with the company I was running, when everything changed for us. It was new. I mean, it was a new world, the culture shift, implementing field level compliance, tracking paperwork, everything like that. And when it came time to try and find a software, because it was just overwhelming for us, I had no idea what to do. And now I decided to start a software company and create my own product. And what we want to do here is take you through those steps to make it an easy process and really find the right fit for you. This first stage that I want to talk to you about is really, how do you identify if you're ready to go from paper to digital, or if your current platform, maybe it's a hybrid of digital, maybe you have some PDFs, fillable PDFs, you're using SharePoint or Dropbox or whatever it may be to file those things. How do you know when it's time to upgrade? How do you know when the status quo is becoming overwhelming? I know at the company that I was running before, when we were implementing safety and the processes that we had in place, it felt normal. And it was until I experienced a life-altering incident where somebody almost died. Luckily, they did not. And it was a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call for me and my company that what we were doing wasn't okay anymore. It was treading water 4 feet underwater. We were drowning. And it took that incident for us to wake up and realize it. And I hope as we go through these stages, it doesn't take that type of an incident for you to realize that there is an easier way, there is a better way. That first stage that I experienced, and again, there's many stages, but I hope some of these will help you identify for yourself, is our company had issues with, I call it the single source of truth, but really what it was is that communication breakdown, that ability to make sure that what you're pushing out and the information you're feeding out to your team stays true. And what we had 100 to 150 workers. So as you can imagine, that's about 8 to 10 high-rise projects ongoing at any given time. And the simple task of, yes, we had to create our safety program and keep that up to date, which, as you know, can be very overwhelming. But just the simple task of changing a form, an update that has to happen maybe from an incident that occurred and you need to update or change something, or just general housekeeping of your safety program, created fragmented worlds. And what I mean by that is we would change a form, get it out to the field by literally driving it to every single site. And 6 or 7 months later, when we'd go and do our site visits, we'd find that the crews were using forms from a year ago or 4 months before that. There was 4 or 5 different versions of the same form floating around across all our crews, across all our job sites. And what that started to create is this, when I say a fragmented reality, it was like an alternate reality of what our safety program was, and the message was getting broken up. There was no ability to keep that from one source pushing it out to all. And so that can be a trigger for you to say, hey, am I struggling with this? Is that something that I need to change? From that, I also found, because of this world, this ecosystem that we had in place, there's so many moving parts that we had to manage. And yes, part of that is, how do I get the message out? And it can be fragmented, but also managing certificates, asset management. It felt like over the years, there's more and more regulations and requirements on our business. And I mean, before the 7-year mark, 7 years ago, when we started implementing what I call safety for the first time, we had safety, but it was personal protective equipment. Wear your hard hat, steel toe boots, and there was some training involved, but that was really it. And then it seemed like every single year and then every single month, we had more and more things that we were required to track. Certificates, as I said, assets and everything else. And I remember I'd go to bed at night fearing. I was scared. I was scared that our business was liable. I was scared that I was liable because did we have workers working on the edge of the building without certificates? Well, that was actually fairly well covered, but had it expired? I mean, we were tracking this in Excel and it required us to check Excel to actually know if they expired. Or had our assets preventative maintenance schedule elapsed? Did we miss something? And when you add all those things together, it's just overwhelming. Did my crews fill out their forms? Did they submit it properly? There is no real way to understand if everything was being tracked because it was so fragmented and so legacy and archaic the way that we were tracking everything. I mean, our crews would do a form in the field and complete it, submit it to the general contractor or prime contractor they were working with. And by the time we got that back to the office, it was 3 weeks to a month later by the time we could actually review it and understand if we were protected properly. Not just protected as a business, but was our crews in the field actually filling out those forms properly? Were they exposing themselves to more danger than they needed to be because perspective they had on the task could have been changed if we knew about it sooner and understood that they were actually at higher risk. And so that weighed on me. And that incident that I spoke about earlier actually poked holes in our safety program and exposed huge liability to the business because some of the forms weren't done properly and so on and so forth. Look at yourself internally and understand, does it have to be this way? Is this really the way safety should be handled? Does it have to be this overwhelming? And one of the last stages here is bridging the gap between the office and the field, the disconnect that happens. And I know this isn't just for construction, but I see this a lot in the construction industry where that gap it's not getting closer together. I feel like it's getting further apart. And one of the things that I find, it's a natural occurrence. I mean, when I started as a laborer, worked my way up into management, it felt like it was almost overnight. Within a month, 2 months, I started to already forget what it was like to work in the field. I started to get more connected to the office and where you come up with strategies and safety programs and everything else, and you forget about the environment that the field level worker works in. Is it minus 20 out when they're working? I mean, one of the common occurrences for our crews is they couldn't fill out the form sometime because their pen was actually frozen. Or they're so wet when they're trying to fill out the form that their forms are getting soaked, or they lost the form, or their forms and safety program is in their job box that's 4 floors away or across the site or in their truck, and it's not accessible. And so what happens is the field level workers, the men and women of the trades that are there to do a specific job, they didn't join to do safety. They didn't become a carpenter or a drywaller or a plumber to do safety. Yes, that is part of the culture, and ideally it becomes more of that package. But we forget they're there to do a task. And when we just keep pushing more and more on them, and it becomes more and more laborious on their shoulders, and it takes away from their day-to-day task with all this paperwork, and all they do is get more and more trouble, it feels like, we're not bringing them closer. And one of the things, if you always feel like the more safety you're putting in, the further you're pushing your team away, and the more and more that disconnect happens, that could be a big sign. I mean, one of the things that is very possible out there when you find the right platform is pulling that together. Software can start to do that. It can start bringing them back into the loop, making safety easy again, and start allowing them to get back to what they signed up to start doing in the first place. And I think that's very important. Once you've identified that, and again, it doesn't have to be a paper system. We hear a lot of the times when when we're talking to customers or when I'm talking to people in the field, it can be a hybrid approach that they have, or even their safety program, that their existing digital safety platform isn't able to pull everything together. it still feels fragmented. They're working in a software in some areas, they're working out of the software in another area, or they have multiple software that are not communicating and they're having trouble managing it. It's, again, you're treading water 4 feet underwater. And so I want to bring somebody into the next stage of this conversation, somebody that has talked to hundreds and hundreds of customers and experienced even more than I have now with the construction industry around some of these pains that they have and how how he's helped them find the right solution. And I know you're talking to all SALUS staff here, but reality is the approach we take is really helping those companies find the right solution for them, whatever it may be. And that's something that Greg's done very well. And come on, Greg, come talk to the team.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. Glad to be here. And as Gabe said, I'm sales manager here at SALUS. And so, I do have the opportunity every day to talk with hundreds and hundreds of safety professionals that are looking to take that leap, right? They've already surpassed that stage one that you were just talking about. And so they know they want to fix something and to find a better solution out there. I think, Gabe, one of the challenges that you see happening all the time is, as they're going about this investigation, this journey of trying to find the right solution, they get hung up on this idea of perfection, right? Ultimately, can't you just find something that's better than the status quo? And how can you solve those existing pains for the field and for safety? I think about this story just after I first started at SALUS, and we were talking with the general contractor based out in Ontario in the GTA, and we were talking about they'd actually gone digital for their superintendents, but their subcontractors, they were still collecting paper from them. And I remember the safety professional we were speaking with, he kind of pushed back and said, Gabe, there's still probably 30 to 40% of our subs that are a problem in terms of getting paper.
Right.
I don't think having a digital solution is going to make that better. And you said, well, you flipped it around, right? What about the other 50, 60%? Would that not still be a win in your mind? Just constantly improving and evolving.
Yeah, that's interesting, Greg. I think that's a good point you bring up. I hear that a lot, and I know we have the slide here that perfection simply doesn't exist. But it's interesting that you say that because I hear that a lot, not just from your experience. I heard it when I was selling as well, and I also hear it when I talk to the construction community. It gets overwhelming to think of all the things you can do. And when you look at technology, you think, okay, this is all the stuff I'm dealing with. Technology has to be able to solve it all. And what you do is you start forgetting about what your struggles are now. And what you start to do is start thinking about all the things that it can do.
Absolutely.
And then you get lost in the fact that if it can't do the 99% of it, well, there might be no point in doing it at all, or I still have to keep looking for that perfect solution. And reality is, you don't. You get there. You work your way there. Start by solving those problems. Get, like you said, what would it be like to be 70% more efficient right now?
Yeah.
And then work together to get to the next stage. And I'm going to ask you another question here. You've taught me something. You've taught me something that's called a consultative sales approach. And to me, like coming from construction, I sales for me, I dealt with 10 different companies. And we'd have a burger and a beer, and it was all relationships. And when I was thinking software, I'm like, oh, it's just a bunch of people cold calling and trying to slam a product down somebody's throat. And you changed my view on that. And maybe talk to me a little bit about that consultative sales approach and what does that mean? Like what does that mean to you? And why does that matter? Why does that matter for our customers to find somebody that has that approach as well?
Yeah, I think you want to find a partner at the end of the day that you feel heard with, that you feel truly understands you and your challenges, and to your point, it's not just trying to, push a product on you, right? That they truly understand that this is, a solution that could help you in your business and your unique challenges, and if it isn't, then maybe they'll recommend something else that could be better suited for you. So I think that's in essence when we talk about the consultative approach and feeling like you've got that partner for the long term, right? It's almost like having as a GC, one of its most trusted subcontractors, and building that long-term relationship that way. Because at the end of the day, you only have one chance to really, work with someone and make that first impression. And if it's not now, maybe it'll be sometime down in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember the first time I was on a demo with you, and you identified that we weren't the right fit, and you were like, well, you know what? You might be a better fit for this software or that software, and it was some of our competitors. And I remember we got off the phone. I'm like, what happened there? And you're like, no, it's not about now. It's about like building that relationship, that trust, finding the right software for that company, pushing the industry into technology, because we all win. I've really changed my perspective, and I thank you for that. That's amazing. So now, the perfect solution doesn't exist. But I've also heard a lot about this all-in-one platform. And now I know, maybe not from the safety officer, but business leaders trying to find something that does it all.
Business leaders, VP of operations, CEOs, owners, and it's that quest, that desire, that idea that there's got to be a platform that does it all. Whether it's doing your accounting for your construction company, your project management, and then just adding in safety into the fold there. But the reality is, a lot of companies find out the hard way by trying to go down that route and fit a square peg in a round hole, and it just doesn't actually work out in the end. And as you can see with this image here, Gabe, you wouldn't really have a subcontractor that's an electrical contractor do your plumbing, right? Specialization in the industry exists for a reason, and it's all about in my mind, having the right tool for the job and having a purpose-built safety platform.
Focus matters. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, I remember when it's not just safety software. I mean, with us, when we started SALUS, I went from my construction world where I had 2 software. Are they really software? We're talking email and Dropbox. Not very extensive. To now we have 30 different software we use to run SALUS. And I remember when I first talked to Scott Switzer, who is our other co-founder and COO, I was like, we have Salesforce. Salesforce costs us a lot of money. Can't Salesforce just do it all, Scott? I'm like, why do we have to buy all these things? Just Salesforce can do it all. And quickly realizing that no, I mean, at some point it's okay, but you need those specialty tools for the job. Focus matters. And when somebody in our team flipped it around on me and started identifying it with the construction industry, and it really made sense. It's like, I mean, look at how construction works. We have a hammer. That's all it does. Nobody's ever tried to change the hammer because it does the best job. We have, 7 different saws you can use, right? Each saw is meant for what it does best. And same with trades. I mean, ideally, the general contractors out there, the prime contractors, we all know you'd love to have 3 contracts that you award. But reality is that doesn't work, because the specialty trades need to do what they do best. And even then, you go from a specialty trade that has a subcontractor as a subcontractor sometimes, because they need to specialize from there. And that's the same thing with finding your your software. Forget safety software. If you're buying a software, buy a software that's focused, that knows what it's doing in its specialty in its world, and then make sure that it can communicate and it plays nice with the other software, because that's the same thing as on a job site, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, trades on a job site, they don't operate in a vacuum, right? They're going to have overlap with each other as they're doing their special work. The same is true for the software. Like you said, yes, by all means, find that purpose-built solution for the task that's so critical to your business, but make sure and ask those questions of that potential partner for you. Can they integrate? Are they open to connecting to the other mission critical platforms for your business?
That's great. So last slide in this conversation, Greg. So we talked a little bit about all of these things, but around the consultative sales approach, make sure you find your partner, you build that relationship, but maybe talk to us through that buying process. I know you've talked to me a little bit about, like I said, the consultative sales approach, but there's things you've mentioned as well about buying a product for what it does now, but also paying attention to what it does in the future.
Yeah, obviously, Gabe, you want to satisfy those challenges that you're experiencing now as a business, right? Vivid in my mind is that picture of, the worker in the field with the wet, soggy forms and getting reamed out by the owner because he can't protect his business now. So I think about, obviously that's a mission critical challenge that needs to be addressed first, right? We talked about how do we solve the core first. So you've got to have something that obviously takes care of those immediate needs, But at the same time, to your point, you want to always have your eye, looking to the future. And, is this a potential partner that is continually innovating? Are they, again, going back to the consultative approach, listening to our challenges and our feedback on the solution, and taking that and actually taking strides with that to help the platform evolve as safety does, because we know safety's only one way.
It's moving fast.
It is, and it's just changing every day, and regulations, and so you want a partner that, again, is open innovation and flexibility, but then also has that support model in place, right? You're not just buying a software, hopefully at the end of the day, you're also investing in a partner that, again, is listening to you, a relationship. And then, you got to ask the tough questions too, right? What happens if that relationship doesn't pan out in the future, right? You want to know those answers to those questions up front as part of your due diligence. So I definitely ask or add that question, to your assessment.
Right. And I think there's two things I'll call out, because I've heard this a lot from whether people we've talked to that have left other software or just speaking to the community again. Do not buy a software for what it's going to do in the future. Let's be clear on that. That's not what Greg's saying here. Buy it for what it can do now.
Yeah.
But make sure you dig into the vision of that business. Whatever software you buy, and there's lots of incredible software out there. In our space, in safety, there's so many incredible companies out there doing incredible things. Make sure your vision aligns. Maybe your vision doesn't quite align with where that company is going in the future. It works now, but you see where they're going and it doesn't quite line up, because at the end of the day, you don't want to buy a software that you're going to switch from in a year. You want to buy something that you can grow with, because at the end of the day, like we said, reality is the software at best can probably get you 90% of the way there. And what I mean by that is that safety is changing, your business is changing, and you're always going to need to grow with it. And it needs to be growing with you. And so really dig in and ask those questions. Greg, thanks.
Thanks, Gabe. Appreciate it.
The next stage here is a very important one. In my opinion, probably the most important stage. And what it is rolling out to win. At the end of the day, you can buy the best software out there with the flashiest lights, the greatest reporting, dashboards, everything. But if you can't roll it out and you can't get adoption, it doesn't matter. Who better to talk about this than our Director of Customer Success, who has rolled out hundreds of customers. Tell us a little bit about your world.
Yeah, my world is, as Gabe mentioned, I'm the Director of Customer Success here at SALUS. So we oversee the rollout and implementation for all of our customers. We also manage those relationships, well beyond the implementation phase and kind of throughout the entire life cycle of the customer.
Now, before we get into the slides, Blair, tell me about something. This is something that you really brought to our team. And before you came, it was actually my brother who was working support and rollout and everything. We had about 4 people when you joined, or 5. And you really identified that we were a very reactive company. We were always just putting out fires. We were there to support our customers, trying to build a relationship. But you really pulled us in and said, look, we need to start being proactive. We need to shift. And we need to start helping our customers. Yes, there's a reactive side, but tell me why it matters so much to have a proactive approach to customer success and onboarding.
Yeah, excuse me.
It's okay.
I think proactivity is kind of one of the pillars of really strong customer success function. There's been a lot of talk here about being a partnership, and that's kind of what we believe in here as well, right? So we don't want to wait for customers to call us. We want to reach out to them, see how things are going, help them solve problems, help them kind of get to that next level, keep moving forward, always getting better, that type of thing.
When a company is looking for a software, really look for that, dig into the customer success side, make sure it's not, we're there when you need us. They're really proactive in their approach, making sure that they're finding something that's going to build a relationship.
Yeah, I think that it's paramount. I mean, technology is obviously great, but the whole experience of software, it goes well beyond just the actual the bells and whistles and the features and things like that. The overall experience of who you're dealing with. Are they there when you need them? Do they care? Are they there to help you get better, or are they just there to make a dime?
Sell a product and check back with you on renewal. I see that with some of our software we use. The relationship aspect isn't there. It's truly they're just there to provide you a product, and sometimes that's okay. Sometimes we don't need that. But I can tell you, with safety, it's very complex. You do need that relationship, and it's not easy. And Blair, you've told me before, that first month is key. You got to be involved. You got to be there. The first month is everything. And we've identified something. And again, this is not us knowing everything. This is us experiencing so much over the last few years. And we're trying to bring this to you. And one of the things that we want to do in this process is identify things that we found to be things that have caused issues in a rollout, caused a rollout to fail, companies leaving potentially because they just couldn't get it off the ground. And so one of the things you called out is a champion. That's like a must-have. So tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having a champion, like you said, must-have. It's paramount to any successful rollout. I think this applies to really any piece of software you buy, whether it's safety software, accounting, what have you.
Yeah.
A lot of people think software is just kind of you plug it in and away you go. That's generally not the case, right? You need to set it up. You got to configure it, and then even after that, there's kind of the ongoing administration of the platform.
Right.
And these things take time, right? It's someone's time, someone in your organization. I mean, we're here to help, of course, but we can't manage the platform on your behalf, right? So having someone in place who really kind of like lives and breathes safety. That's their world. They're dedicated to it. They have the time to spend on it is super important. Most companies that we've seen fail with their rollout, it's because they do have a champion, but that champion they're doing too many things. They're wearing too many hats. They might be running safety over here, but then over here they're dealing with accounting and finance. They might even be going out and getting contracts and things like that. And unfortunately, safety just often falls by the wayside, right? It's not it's not a revenue generating activity in an organization. So it often just kind of gets put on the back burner. And that's kind of the number one reason I would say why some companies fail to roll out.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And you mentioned safety, but I'll ask you this. I mean, we've also seen companies that have 15 safety officers or 5 safety officers dedicated to safety. And we've also seen some of them struggle at the beginning to roll it out. But where we've seen that shift, even in those same companies, is they actually identify that the safety officers, yes, they're going to enforce the system and use it as a tool. But what we've seen is actually they bring in an administrator that can focus on the implementation aspect and the quarterbacking it all. It's about the first stage. The first, depending on the size of the company, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months of rollout that has to be coordinated. So does it have to be a safety officer?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a safety officer. And, like you said, I mean, the first 3 months are obviously critical. Like, we can generally tell within 3 months of it bringing on a new customer whether it's going to work out.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, every organization is different, right? The makeup is different. The size is different. So we see a lot of companies where it's not just one person, it's kind of a committee of people.
Right.
So maybe there is a safety officer involved. There could be, administrative people involved. When you think about rolling out a safety software, there's kind of 2 different elements to it. You have, of course, the safety side, which is, designing the safety program, implementing the safety program, and enforcing it, of course. But then you just have kind of the administrative side. It's just managing the platform, making sure the forms are up to date, user profiles, things like that, right? So sometimes you might have someone on the safety side just kind of overseeing that area, and then you'll have someone else who's maybe, it could be an administrative person. I've seen HR people, accounting people in some cases, where they're kind of in the office. They're the ones that are really keeping the platform up to date, and that allows the safety officer to really be out there, doing what they do best, right? Enforcing safety and that type of stuff.
The next thing that we want to talk about, and this is something that kind of ties into all of the struggles that we were talking about, and a champion matters, but also, Blair, tell me about why identifying a plan matters. Like you've told me, it's not just about rolling out a software, it's about, again, your team connecting with that team and understanding truly about where they want to go or what they want to. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, we built a kind of a prescribed onboarding program that we generally take all of our customers through. There's some flexibility there. We make adjustments for certain organizations based on their unique set of needs and things like that. But ultimately, that's key, right? Having kind of a roadmap, a timeline, identifying that right from day one, and then kind of ushering them through that process is incredibly important. And like you said, I mean, keep it simple, right? You don't need to do everything all at once, right? And any piece of software is going to come with a whole list of features. You don't need to use every feature on day one, right? Start small. Keep it simple. Focus on the core features of the product. Get those rolled out first. Wait till you're successful with those,
right?
And then kind of build from there, right? Start to roll in other features after that, right? It's not really a race, It's all, we always look at this as like a long-term thing, right? We're not, we don't want to sign up customers for a year. We want to sign up customers for 10 years, 20 years, right?
Yes.
So there's no rush, right? It's do it correctly, do it methodically, and don't rush through it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Blair. And at the end of the day, again, we're using examples from what we've experienced with our customers, but it's not just about if you're working with SALUS. Whatever software you're working with, and to be honest, this aligns even if it's not safety software. Make sure, the reason, like we said at the beginning, you're identifying pain in your business. That's the whole reason you're looking for a software. Replicate that first with the software. And during the buying process, identify if that software, yes, you're going to get lost in what it can do in the future, but can it replicate what you're doing now? And the reason that's so important is because you need to eliminate the pain that your team has, your field workers, whoever is using it. And the minute you do that, if you can replicate what they're doing and then just provide them an easier solution, and sometimes it means taking a step back where you're only doing one form, like you've told me before, Blair, or two forms, and they see how easy it is, and they see that it's making their life easier, you get buy-in. Once you get buy-in, that's key, right, Blair?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting buy-in from the field is obviously the number one thing, right? You got to accomplish that right off the bat as fast as possible. And then once you get that, things just kind of snowball from there. Like you said, they realize how easy it is. They realize, hey, you know what? This is actually making my job a little bit easier.
Yeah. One other thing that you've taught me as well, and some of the little tricks I've seen you use or your team use, is bring people in. A lot of the times during the buying process, not everyone has the privilege of seeing the product that they've bought, and change is difficult. And again, that gap we talked about between the field and the office, I know this from being in the field. It feels like another thing's being pushed on us. Another thing's being pushed on us. Bring them into the conversation. When you're creating those forms, bring them in and ask, hey, how do you like this? This is replicating what your form is now, but does that feel right for you and your crew? And allow them to play around with it and take them in, because then they feel like they're part of the solution. And again, make it easy, make them be a part of the solution, and then you can take it up. You can bring it to the next level. And that becomes easier because, again, bringing them into the conversation, but also it's just all of a sudden they open their phone or their device and a small change is there and it's not as overwhelming. And that's how you can really start to push innovation. And Blair, I'm not going to ask you to leave. I'm actually going to get you to stay for the next one, but I'm going to invite Greg in so we can have a little three-way conversation on this and how we start to let technology to innovate your safety. And that's an interesting one because I think, and before we talk about the pushing into innovation, what we see happen, and you've seen this before, we've all seen this, is you roll out your program, you get adoption, and all that stuff you talked about and you dug into in finding the perfect solution or all the things you want to do in the future with your program, and that brainstorm you had with your software provider and the true partner falls on the wayside, and you start just making this status quo. You have 60% of your system you bought is still not being used, and what happens is you settle in. And so one of the things that we like to talk about is don't settle in. Let yourself get immersed. Investigate, learn. Maybe Blair, you or Greg, whoever wants to jump in, talk a little bit about what you've seen, like companies settling in. How do they break through that? How do they get to the next level and don't end up where they were when they started?
It's one thing if you're going from one software to another, but if you're going from paper to digital, you kind of have to like rewire your brain to some degree, right? In the paper world, everything you do is on paper, right? You're writing on a piece of paper, but it's not really doing much good if it doesn't leave that piece of paper and translate into real action, right?
Right.
So in the digital world, there are a lot of elements of a safety program that they don't live in the form anymore. So like I'll use like a corrective action, which is obviously incredibly important, right? You can write a corrective action onto a paper form. But if I don't go out to you and say, hey, go do this,
or text it,
it's not doing anyone any good, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about digital safety, a corrective action is its own kind of object. It doesn't live in a form; it lives in the system,
right?
And it gets sent to people. It's interactive. and it allows you to kind of close the loop on it much more easily, rather than, again, just writing it on a piece of paper, right? So changing your kind of mindset and just how you think about safety is key.
It's so true. I mean, there's so many things that I think, you might start out going digital or moving to another platform or out of a hybrid model, simply because you wanted to just get out of digital forms or paper forms, But then you start to learn as you evolve and learn more about the platform, to Blair's point, that there's so many other aspects that you could take on, right? Like you could use a report and set up custom notifications as well. So there's just so much there. And yeah, you want to ensure that you're not standing still, because safety certainly isn't. Yeah,
that's interesting. And what I think is important is to create that push and pull effect with the software that you choose. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're doing it the right way, you're going to replicate what you're doing, and then you're going to start using the stuff within the system. But immediately, you're going to start looking at areas where it can improve. And when you start talking to your customer success manager, whatever business you're working with, you want to collaborate and innovate with them, and you're going to push them into innovation. And then all of a sudden, it's like an elastic band. They're going to pull you, and then you're going to push them, and they're going to pull you. And it's this relationship that really can innovate and push safety to the next level. And one of the things that I think, and you touched on it a little bit there, both of you, is how do we use it to start fighting things that we've always struggled with, like complacency. For me, complacency is a big topic because we all know complacency kills. I mean, I've told both of you stories about, and I think everyone in our company is like, I just still don't understand how it's possible, but how working in high-rise construction, I personally have been on the edge of the building, looking down the side, measuring something, doing whatever I was doing, and realizing that I of course had my harness on, but I was actually clipped off to myself. And the reason is, and I know you're like, why are you even talking about this? You can't tell people that. But it's true, and we have to talk about this. And the thing is that I was not scared anymore of heights. And I was back and forth over the guardrail, tying off, tying back on. And this one time, maybe I was paying attention to something different, whatever it may be, and I was hooked onto myself. And that is the reality. This stuff happens. And that's a big extreme, but it can happen with working on a 5-foot step ladder. And all of the safety officers and people in the room know this stuff happens day in and day out. And so what we've found a lot is when you're doing paper forms or digital forms or hybrid of both, forms are designed, yes, to protect your business, but they're also the core of what we're doing in safety. Everything we're doing is to protect the worker, allow them to be safer, and those forms are actually designed to break up complacency. And what we've seen is that those forms can actually start causing the same complacency because it's the same form they've done for 2 years or a year, and they can close their eyes and what we call pencil whip it. And so tell me, both of you, I know you both have stories.
Yeah.
How have you seen companies out there, sorry, there's a fly flying around my head. How have you seen them innovate and do unique things with their forms to keep that breakup?
Well, I think, Gabe, one of the biggest concerns for a company when they're looking to go digital is that, right? They're afraid of the workers just pencil whipping the forms and, it being too automatic. But like you said, there are a lot of creative ways where you can actually keep it even more interactive than just a static paper form. So, for example, you could hyperlink within the form, maybe a link to some policies online or something that you've uploaded into SALUS or even a live video or recorded video. So just lots of options in how you can think about actually making it more interactive than it's ever been before.
Yeah, I think, complacency is something we deal with all the time, right?
Right.
People are always trying to cut corners, right? They don't want to fill out the forms. They want to get done as fast as possible. And, of course, we don't want to, promote that sort of thing. But there are a lot of things that we can do to make things easier for them. You don't buy software to make your life more difficult. You buy it to make your life easier. So things like things Greg mentioned, but also things like building logic into a form.
Right.
You think about like a hazard assessment. We don't want to just fill out the form for you, but we can use certain tools to kind of guide the user down a path that just makes the process of filling out a form more streamlined, easier. They don't have to think quite as much, but they still have to kind of put that thought in. Yeah, exactly. So make it easier for them without promoting complacency, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like you said, Blair, I think you're right, but it's also dangerous because yes, you want to make it more manageable and easier, but you also don't want it to be so easy that you're just opening a form, hitting yes, move to the next thing, because there's a purpose in which that's there. And the goal is, again, they're supposed to stop, think, identify. And when you mentioned a video, I remember a customer or a company of ours that we were working with. I love the way that they created their forms. They actually had a 1 or 30-second video at the top of, I think it was their hazard assessment that they changed every month. And it was just on ladder safety. It was a mandatory video. To finish the form, they had to watch it. And they also another company would just switch the order of things or change the wording and the verbiage. And it just keeps it was still easier to do, but it kept them engaged with what their surrounding environment and things that they were noticing happening in their business. And I think that's really cool. And I think it's a really important thing to start thinking outside the box. And when you find that software that's going to pull it all together, one of the things that I think is the coolest part about this, and I identify this with a lot because when I, again, talk about what safety was before that 7-year mark for my business, I found safety officers were in the field a lot. They were building a culture. They were mentoring. They were there. And over the last 7 years, it feels like a lot more has been pushed into the office, more of that administrative burden. And I feel like when you find that software and things start to become manageable again, you really allow them to start getting back in the field and being able to do what they were trained to do. You've talked to lots of safety officers, both of you, whether it's in the sales process or rolling out. Have you heard much about how, Blair, allowing them to get back to what they do best and coaching and everything like that? Yeah,
I think that's the goal. You referenced it earlier. You want to update a form, you're driving around all the sites, replacing the form, things like that. Going digital, it cuts those kind of activities out of your day, right?
Yeah.
You're not going site to site, collecting forms or replacing forms, things like that. So it does free up your time to really focus on what truly matters, right? Which is, obviously making the site safer and just enforcing a strong safety culture. So
to me, it's talking to safety professionals. It's about prioritization, right? There's only so many hours in the day, and they've only got so little time and so many potential sites that they're managing the safety and responsibility for. So, and the admin burden, like we talked about, it's not what they signed up for.
Yeah.
And so if we can ease that up by putting it all together, making it more connected in real time, then they're able to focus on what matters most and where to most importantly spend their time next. Start
coaching and mentoring again. Well, that's awesome, guys. I'm going to move to the final stage here. So the final stage here, this is something that I really like talking about. Really passionate about. It's the future of where we can go. One of the things that I think is the first step when we talk about going to the future of where we can go is, and we touched on that with Blair and Greg, is making safety manageable again. Make it so that we can breathe again, so that we're not 4 feet underwater. Get your team, your safety team, or whoever is using the program, allow them to start pulling those balls that they're juggling in the air that keep falling, pull them into a manageable location and make sense of it all. And when you start to be able to do that, what you start to be able to find is that you start to be able to pull data together. You start to be able to see real-time information coming in from your company, and you can make decisions and start catching things in the moment and coaching and mentoring. But not just that. You can also start to see, and this is, again, we're going into the future here, there's an opportunity where there's an industry collaboration that can start happening. Technology is incredible because for the first time, companies like ours, and again, there's so many amazing companies, I'm going to keep stressing that because it's not just one company, it's a movement that we need to do together, that we can all start learning the data. We're actually getting mobile apps in the hands of field level workers, and they're filling out forms and doing things. The data and the stuff that we can start learning from as a collaboration and a community can really change the future. And one of the things, I think of off the top of my head is as a story that I had from when I was in construction. I'll make it quick because I know we're running out of time. Window installation, Vancouver, probably about 8 years ago, a window fell from a high-rise during the installation process. It wasn't our company. It was another company, and to this day, I have no idea why that happened. And it's not to incriminate that company. It's for me, it was, I know I'm doing the exact same thing, and all my crews, we have 8 jobs going right now, and we're doing the same thing as that company. We could be doing the exact same thing, missing one catalyst to make that accident happen over and over every day. Could potentially be repeating that thing, and we have no idea how to prevent that. And that's just one example. I mean, that could be happening across the country, across the world. These incidents are being repeated over and over. And regulatory bodies and the government or whoever in your territory or province or state is in charge of sharing this information is trying. They're trying to get that information out, but it's hard. And so a world that I'd love to see in the future is a collaboration where we can start to understand these things in real time. Imagine a world where me as a window installation company got a notification, again, not saying where or who, but what happened, how it was prevented, and to make sure that we're not doing it ourselves in the future. And that can be an incredible world to live in. And another thing, this is something that we all talk about. I hear this a lot. Starting to move from the reactive to the proactive, starting to use this data not only in our companies, but across the industry to understand things that are happening in the past, to start preventing it from happening in the future, being proactive rather than reactive. And I mentioned this before. This is something that I'm going to go back to the digital form, but this is very common in other fragmented systems. It's a hybrid of both. 3 weeks it took for me to get a form back. That's 3 weeks for me to identify that and learn from that just within our company. But we weren't sharing that data across the company. It was very hard to move that data around and learn from that. And I know a lot of you out there do it much better than I did, and you have a lot of data you're sharing, but that data is very hard to actually share as a community as well. And how do we start pooling that information together? How do we start pushing technology to start learning from all the surrounding things that are happening to predict the future and prevent things from happening? It's something that we can do, but it takes a collaboration. And I'm excited for it to happen. Now, I know I've talked for a very long time, and I want to get some questions in here. You guys are laughing at me because you know I do this all the time. But that is it. We are done. It's been a pleasure, and thank you. And now I'll open it up to some questions, turn it back over to the moderators and Samantha, and enjoyed the conversation. You guys can come back in.
Thank you so much for your valuable information. As Gabe said, now is a great time to start getting your questions in. We did have one question come in quite a bit. This person says, your analogy about the hammer is so true. I am currently in the exact same one-size-fits-all software nightmare. SALUS seems to be dealing with it in a way that my boss can understand. So, how do I push my boss over the edge to start this new digital safety program?
That's a great question.
Great question.
It's funny. I think about, Gabe and his experience having been a construction owner in the past, right? And feeling, not only that it's something that is the safety, person's responsibility, but ultimately the buck stops with the owner of that company, right? So whenever we look to, help bolster and build that business case with their safety professional, a lot of that information is going to come from you because you understand and know your organization, your owner, what's going to resonate with you best or with them. That said, we do have some great experience working with companies to develop a business case that's tailored to your organization. Looking at what are the metrics or numbers that are going to manage or be important to that owner, right? Ultimately, new contracts for your company will hinge on clean safety records. And, to Blair's point, it's not a revenue generating activity per se, but it is a business risk. And, just hearing about Gabe's story as well, what could keep your owner up at night? And so I think how we help, be more efficient, drive down certain costs while at the same time making it safer. So certainly lots of ideas there, but yeah, happy to have more discussions offline as well on how to help there.
I'll add one more thing to that. I think at the end of the day as well, use terminology that the ownership or executive group is going to understand. And one of the reasons we talk about this in the words of construction is because it took that for me to understand why I can't just use Salesforce. because focus does matter. And at the end of the day, you need the best tool for your department. There would be no question if somebody came to me and said, we need a new hammer drill or a better hammer drill for our window installers. I've been like, yeah, absolutely. They need that tool to do their job properly. There's no difference here. Your safety team needs the best tool for their job, and it needs to be focused on what they do best, which is safety. They can't use something that's focused on accounting or project management that's just a plug-in. And so use that terminology that they understand to help guide that process. And whatever software company you're dealing with should be able to help you to put a package together as well.
Perfect. So our next question is SALUS compatible with something similar to Core like SiteDocs has? Oh,
that's a very specific question. Yeah, I think great question. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, we're 70% of our customers are Core certified and use it for Core auditing and everything like that. So yeah, we work with lots of businesses that do Core audits on a yearly basis.
A company that has been doing Core for so many years, paper-based, and looking to go digital and make that process easier, or they're looking to get Core certified and want to make that, having that paper trail of 6 months prior a lot easier to manage and go back for doing your audit. So yeah, to Gabe's point, we have 70-80% of our client base that are Core certified and absolutely use SALUS to make that process so much easier.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask one last question before we wrap it up today. And this one came in quite a bit. If you're choosing a digital solution for the first time, how long does it usually take to set up this new technology, training, etc.?
Yeah, I can answer that one. Our onboarding process, we typically prescribe it for about 3 months. But I would say that is kind of like an average amount of time. It really boils down to how big your organization is, how many workers do you have, how many sites do you have. I've seen companies roll out in a month or less. I've seen larger enterprise organizations, take longer than 3 months. So what I always tell people is like, we're here to help you, and we'll move as fast as you want to go. So if you're committed and you want to just hit the ground running and get going quickly, we can help you make that happen. But yeah, there's a lot of different kind of factors that would dictate how long it would typically take. So
yeah, I think it's important to remember those things that we talked about, because again, it's whatever software you choose, make sure you go through that process, because at the end of the day, it's identifying what your goals are is going to dictate how long it takes. What are you considered to be rolled out? Is it replicating your existing workflow? Maybe that can take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. Or is it to actually move the needle into other areas that you haven't been doing safety with before? So plan that out. Bring your customer success manager, whatever software you're working with, and map that out. Find your champion, and then make sure that you're checking the boxes as you go, and so that you see and track that progress. And then that whatever the length is, at the end of the day, it's success that matters. So at the end of the year, when it comes to renewal with whatever software you're using, make sure you know what success looks like. And then it's less of a matter of time and more of a matter of success.
Fantastic. So it sounds like SALUS really is the way to go if you're looking to build something to really identify and suit your specific needs.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, I want to pass it back to you before we wrap it up today and just ask, is there anything you want our audience to take away from this, keep top of mind, and just move forward?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to think of top of mind is really, I mean, there's probably a point for every one of those slides, but really remember that what you're dealing with can be solved. If you're overwhelmed, which we see probably most often, and I still, as I see more and more companies and talk to existing customers or future customers, there's just an overwhelming sense of being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it's just so much. Safety is so much to handle. There's so many moving parts. It's so complex. So take a breath and start looking for that solution. And again, remember, it doesn't have to get you all the way there, because to be honest, there's not a software out there that I've seen, including SALUS, that can do it all right now. Find that partner for the future, build it together, work together, and start making your life easier again, so you can start seeing your family, and also get back to building culture in your company.
And I would also say, look at it long term, right? Don't look, a month from now, 3 months from now. Think about years from now, right? You don't want to jump around to different solutions, right? So find the right solution that you think is going to fit for you in the long run, and go for it.
Yeah, I think to end from my side, I would say that, just go for it, right? You may have thought about going digital or moving platforms at some point in the past, and for whatever reason you didn't move forward. But you don't have to wait to see if there's something that we could do to help you. There may be a challenge that we've helped overcome other companies, that they've had to try and go in digital before. So, we've got some creative ideas, and happy to talk about that.
Start climbing the mountain. Sounds good. Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you so much, everyone.